Hello and welcome to Monson Made This. My name is Michael. I cook vegan food, so if you want more vegan content and recipes, you should click that subscribe button below. Give this video a thumbs up while you're down there. I think that's everything I say in my intro. It has been a minute. Hey, welcome back. If you're new to the channel, welcome. It's great to have you. If you're returning, thanks for coming back. I really appreciate it. I noticed looking at some of the data on my channel that a lot of the people that watch my videos aren't subscribers. So hey, just go ahead and subscribe. You may find out later you really like what you've subscribed to, but you could just subscribe now. That's my plea. Anyway, today I am very fall inspired. I've got the windows open. It's a beautiful fall day here in Las Vegas. I've got pumpkin, squash, those kind of flavors on my mind. So today I'm going to be making for you probably should have thought of a title for this before filming the video. Basically, it is a squash lasagna roll-up. I promise there will be a name for it. I always do this. This video, though, is not going to be a finalized, fully fleshed out recipe. This is the second test of this. I had the idea the other day, ran a test. I didn't love the result, but I saw where I needed to go with it. So I thought, you know what? Instead of wasting food, because groceries are expensive these days, I'm just going to film the second test recipe for it, and then the full written recipe with everything correct will be linked below at monsonmadethis.com. So there's a few steps to this. There is, of course, the lasagna noodles that need to be cooked that are going to be rolled up. It's going to be cooked in an 8x8 square baking dish. There is a cashew-based white bechamel style sauce that'll be on the bottom and the top. The roll-ups themselves will have a delicious, I wanted to do butternut squash, but it's going to be actually canned pumpkin. So it's got a canned pumpkin, but it's seasoned really nicely in kind of like a umami, rich, cheesy kind of way. And also a tofu ricotta with some spinach. So a few different elements. They're all going to come together. Lots of hands here. So without further ado, I've got this pot here behind me ready to accept the lasagna noodles. I need to salt it, throw those in. We'll get some cashews blended. We'll get the butternut squash thing happening over here. So let's dive right in and make this dish that I've yet to unname. Lasagna. Why don't you comment below if you haven't, I guess you've already seen the title. I'll come up with something, but comment below what you think this should be called. So let's make this dish. Admittedly, these noodles do not like to go in here, so the water is boiling. Trying to do my best to push them in as they soften. I don't want any to break, though. I don't know. This is the biggest pot that I have. This should work. So these are going to loosen up. They're going to cook for, the package says 9 to 11 minutes. I'm going to let them go for 9. I still want them a little bit al dente. You don't want to break them. You want at least, well, exactly 16 whole and cooked. So I'm awkwardly kneeling down here, just, I don't have a good excuse, but the lasagna is in here. It's going all right. It's got about 5 or so minutes left. The next thing we're going to work on is the pumpkin component. Oh, this is a really terrible shot. I had originally wanted to do it with butternut squash. I had baked the squash, and after cooking a 1-pound squash and realizing that it yielded like only a cup and you need about 3.5 cups, I scrapped that idea and decided to just go with the canned pumpkin approach. So I'm gonna grab the ingredients that I need for the pumpkin portion. If you've been around my channel for a while, you know that I love things like nutritional yeast and miso because of the like umami they give, and we're gonna do that same treatment to this. So actually, you know what? I'm gonna wait for the noodles because those can just hang out. They'll hang out in some cold water after I rinse them off, and then yeah, we'll just do this after. I'm in no hurry. I've devoted my day to this recipe video for you all, so I can stop waving this pumpkin. So the noodles are finished, and actually the package that I cooked last time was a Sprouts brand, and it was 9 to 11 minutes, and I just didn't even think about it, and I looked at this package that I had, which was Barilla, and it said cook to 8 minutes. So I tested one, seemed like it was al dente enough. You don't want it fully cooked. You want it to have still quite a bit of texture to it. So I drained those, rinsed them. It's hanging out in a large bowl of water, and they can kind of just hang out indefinitely. Well, I guess not indefinitely, but they can hang out while we do the rest of this stuff. I decided that the next thing I want to make is actually the cashew bechamel sauce. And that's just so that has a chance to kind of cool down because I don't want that too hot. I guess I don't want anything too hot. Oh, the pasta's done. All right, I have the setup here for, now I have the setup. The setup here for everything I'm using to make the, including my recipe on my phone here. Everything I need to make this sort of cashew-based bechamel sauce. So it's a cream sauce that's gonna go on the bottom and the top, and it's gonna kind of be, even though there's a cheesiness to the pumpkin squash component, this is gonna be kind of like a creamy, gooey, cheesy component. So basic kind of cashew cream, 2 cups of water here. My first test, I used a full cup of cashews and I thought it was a little bit too thick. So it's a scant 1 cup of raw cashews. I'm using this accidentally vegan granulated chicken broth base. Basically just enough to make 2 cups of broth. You could use whatever your favorite veggie broth is. You could essentially make this entire recipe like oil-free. Guess you could use gluten-free noodles as well. So you could lower the salt content, do whatever adjustments you need to make. This is the broth bouillon that I'm using. Better than bouillon's great. Again, any type of vegetable broth, you'll just need to season to taste. And then I'm adding some nutritional yeast here, quite a bit. Again, it's kind of our creamy, cheesy type of layer. So I'm gonna grab my lid. I'm gonna blend this up until there are no bits of cashew remaining, and then it's actually going to cook on the stove. And we want it to just come to a light simmer, like just barely start to form bubbles. It'll start to thicken at that point, but I don't want it to get too thick in the pot. I want it to save that extra thickening for once it's in the pan, baking with the lasagna rolls. I think we're good here. I'm just gonna use the pot that I cooked my noodles in because it's there and there's nothing else in it. So let's head back to the stove, get this slightly thickened and season to taste. Here is my pot. It is on medium heat and I'm pouring in my cashew and broth mixture. And basically I'm just going to keep an eye on this, stir it fairly continuously. Again, I want it to just slightly form a bubble or two. It'll slightly thicken at that point. I'll turn it off and take it off the stove or put it on the back of the stove, and it can just hang out until we're ready to assemble. And I'm also gonna taste this for seasoning. It needs some black pepper and a little bit of nutmeg, but I'll add that at the end. So I actually already have this off, but as you can see here, it sort of changes texture slightly, just starts to thicken. It's not a full like gravy texture per se, even though this is the same method I use to make my sausagey gravy. But this is just a nice, loosely creamy, it'll thicken up more as it bakes, but this is exactly the texture I want. So this is just gonna hang out on the back of the stove, no heat, lid on until we're ready for it. Okay, so recap. Noodles are cooked, they're hanging out in some cool water in the sink. The cashew-based bechamel sauce is hanging out back there. Now I want to make the tofu ricotta. Are you able to see this here? We're gonna make the tofu. I have the door open, so the pups are free to come in and out, and Odie's having some beef with the neighbor dog, I guess. Anyway, let's make the tofu ricotta. I have a block of firm tofu here that I basically just put into a towel and wrung out a little bit to get some extra moisture out. And now it's kind of a crumbly texture, which is exactly what I want. And we're basically just going to be seasoning this. I'm also adding some frozen spinach. Now, a note here, this was not in the original test recipe, and this is one of the things that I thought the initial dish was really missing. So this is 10 ounces of frozen spinach that's just been put into a towel and wrung out. Those dogs. Odie. Pardon me, I've got to bring the dogs in. Odie! You guys want a treat? That always works. Close the door. Hey, let's make some tofu ricotta. We have a block of firm tofu crumbled up. It's been put into a towel, extra water drained. Same with some frozen spinach that I drained, and then I actually went back and kind of chopped it up a little bit more. Can't go back out there, Hopper. Trying to sneak his little chew toy out there, or snack. What did I call it? Treat. Okay, so we've got the tofu, my recipe here. This actually comes from a recipe I did last year, which was another butternut lasagna. In that recipe, though, the noodles were made by the butternut squash. This one's different, but fighting over the treat. Did you give up your treat? Odie, no. Odie stole the treat from Hopper. No, you don't do that, Odie. The recipe's on my phone. This came from a recipe from last year, butternut lasagna. I just thought that this really needed something that was going to kind of lighten it up a little bit, just put a little bit more air in there. I also wanted to increase the protein, so this is doing quite a few things. Okay, so spinach. Why is this is taking forever? Adding quite a bit of nutritional yeast because we're going for kind of a ricotta type of experience. So of course we want that for the cheesiness. Apple cider vinegar. Give it a little bit of a tang. Of course, the full recipe and measurement will be on the recipe on monsonmadethis.com. Salt, quite actually a bit of salt. A note also just on this recipe in general, you really, really, really want to make sure, olive oil, you really, really want to make sure that you taste everything as you're going and that everything is very flavorful. That is one thing that I wish I would have been a little bit better at when I made the initial test batch. I don't feel like I had everything seasoned properly. So make sure that you cook the noodles in salted water. Again, unless you're watching your salt, then that's your own journey. Make sure you cook the noodles in salted water. Make sure that your bechamel, you taste it, it's very seasoned. Make sure that when we make the butternut squash component, that that's well seasoned. Same with this spinach, ricotta, and tofu situation. I'm gonna make sure that it's well seasoned as well. So I'm just gonna go through, work this together, work the seasoning into it. I'm not gonna let it hang out in the fridge because I don't want it to be cold. You could basically make all these things if you really wanted to. You could make everything a day ahead, refrigerate it. You could probably even like fully assemble this and have it refrigerated and bake it off at the party. It only takes about 30 minutes to bake. This looks super delicious. Smells really good. And I'm just gonna grab a spoon or a fork to taste it. Again, this is just gonna add some lightness, some flavor, some protein. I definitely noticed when I made the initial batch with just the squash, with the noodles, which I should have known was a bad idea to begin with, that it just needed something else. I really like that. Doesn't need any more salt. Just because I can, I'm gonna add a little bit more nutritional yeast. And I'm gonna add a little bit more olive oil. That's really good. Initially, I was thinking about, like, the idea from this dish really came from wanting to do like a butternut squash ravioli without putting in all of the work. And this would definitely make a really good ravioli filling as well. Voila. You probably don't need to make this much. The other recipe only uses half of this amount. I decided to make a full amount just in case. We'll see how much of this we actually use. Again, it'll all be in the recipe. All right, stop fidgeting with this. All right, next thing is the butternut squash, which is canned pumpkin component. That's the last thing we have to make, and then it's on to assembly. So good, I just want to eat it. Here is the base for the pumpkin component. So there's olive oil in there, there's some shallot that's diced, about 5 or 6 cloves of garlic that has been pressed. That's a big old chunk of miso, some nutritional yeast. Over here we've got some dried sage, some dried ginger, some chili flake. And this is just going to be kind of, I don't know what I'm saying here. This is going to get kind of mixed together, just kind of mixed in with the olive oil, let the flavors bloom a little bit, just kind of come together. Might even add a bit more oil. This is difficult to do with the camera in one hand, but basically this is just going to kind of come together, forming a flavor base that we're then going to add this pumpkin to. So I just want this, again, flavors to kind of bloom and mingle for a couple minutes before that goes in. Now I am adding the pumpkin into the pot here with that mixture of seasonings and spices and aromatics. And I want this on low. The point here is just to get all the flavors mingling throughout the pumpkin or your butternut squash. And you also want to, I want to just kind of loosen up the pumpkin a little bit and maybe even just kind of reduce a little bit of the liquid out, depending on how thick or thin your pumpkin or puree is. So if you were trying to do this with just like a whole butternut squash, you probably want about 2.5 pounds before cooking, and that'll probably get you to the same amount. Again, you want about 3.5 cups, whatever this large can is. The initial test batch of this was made with some pumpkin puree that I had literally had in the freezer for a year, because at the end of last season I had decorated with a lot of pumpkins and I wanted to use them up, and so I baked them, pureed them, stored them, and they stayed an entire year until I grabbed them out and used them for this. So this is looking pretty good as I'm stirring it together, and I guess I should show you this. Let's show you. So this is looking pretty good. This is almost ready. I added a bit of agave. That was the last thing I needed to add before the very, very last ingredient, which is some chopped walnuts. You could use pecans. You just want this for a little bit of texture. Kind of just helps with the whole thing so you don't just have soft on soft on soft. I think the pecans or walnuts really do help here. And that's it. The heat is going off and we are ready to set up the assembly station. And here we have the cashew bechamel, the spinach and tofu ricotta, the pumpkin / butternut squash mixture. The last thing you want to do before you set up your assembly station is just taste each of these, make sure they are all seasoned perfectly, adding a little bit more salt, pinch of pepper, more ginger. Just make sure it all tastes delicious on its own. All right, well, it's time to get our hands dirty. I've got my station set up here. I'm using, again, this 8x8 baking dish, and this is, just from a mathematical standpoint, what I think is going to be the best size and shape for this. We're gonna be working in batches of 4. So I have a kind of a cutting mat here. There are 4 lasagna noodles on there. I have my butternut or pumpkin mixture. I have my ricotta and spinach mixture. I've left the bechamel back there because we only need it on the bottom and the top. So I've flooded the base of the 8x8 with the bechamel. And again, working kind of in quarters or working in working in batches of 4 at a time just kind of helps you also to like ration the ingredients. So you want just, you don't want to overfill these. And I think with the, I'm gonna do it once from this angle and I'll get a closer shot for you. So I think with the butternut or pumpkin mixture, I'm just gonna call it pumpkin because it's what it is. I'm not fooling anybody by saying butternut. You just kind of want a single smear of it down the center. It's okay if it's not perfect. I would say maybe about somewhere between 2 to 3 tablespoons maximum. It helps if you use a rubber kind of spatula like I'm using here. The thing you don't want to do is just be too aggressive with the amount of ingredients that you're using and run out, which is exactly what happened my very first batch. Is I started to fill them really full and didn't have enough to finish. So 2 of them were left empty. Same thing again with this. We want to, I'm just going to use my hands here. We want to kind of ration this. And because I've got the 4 here, I can just sprinkle it all over. This stuff is so good. Like, I've had to stop myself from just devouring this with a spoon. Keep in mind, this is all going to be rolled up. So even though it doesn't look like you've got maybe a ton of ingredients in each of these, they will, as they roll up, become a little bit more full. Turning this just so it's easier for me to roll. And I'm going to carefully roll these. I want them to be a little bit loose, actually. Obviously, we're going 4 by 4. But I want them to be a little bit loose so the bechamel sauce that we're going to be adding at the end on top has somewhere to kind of go into. I want it to seep down into the rolls. 3. And you can see why working in batches of 4 works here. Okay, so I'm going to clean up slightly, move the camera just so you can get a closer shot of what I'm doing here, and then I'll continue to fill this up. I'm also gonna preheat my oven so we can get this right in. Here are all of the rolls in the pan, and they just need to be covered with the final layer of cashew bechamel sauce. Beautiful. So here again is the beautiful rolls all together. They just need their final layer, and I guess this is maybe why it wasn't a great reason to use this big pot. I'm gonna use a ladle to get out as much as I can and then have to get it out with a rubber scraper. And again, I really want it to get in between. It's gonna thicken up and it's gonna kind of, it'll be a little bit of a binder. I don't know how to really explain it, but you want it in between. It's gonna kind of, actually it itself kind of has almost like a ricotta type of texture in the end. And then you see that it's raised above the pan, or the rolls themselves are kind of high above the pan. That's great because that's gonna give us nice crispy edges as well. Let me grab my scraper from back here. So it's gonna be nice, creamy in the center, but if you're lucky enough to get one of the edge pieces, you'll have that nice crispy edge. Smells so good. Don't waste any of this. The last thing I want to do is add a bit of fresh grated nutmeg on top. So let me grab that. And this just is to kind of add to the fall flavors that we've already added to it, but also quite common with Italian dishes that are kind of creamy in nature to have a bit of nutmeg on top. All right, it's heavy. Here it is. This is going in the oven. It's preheated at 400. It's gonna go in for about 30 minutes and we'll see it after that. Look at it bubbling. Has just a few minutes left, but the house smells incredible. Looks beautiful, just waiting for it to get a little bit more golden brown on top. Here it is, bubbling, fresh out of the oven, smells incredible. I think it looks pretty good too. So I need to let this hang out for just about maybe 10 minutes before I start to dish it up and see how I did. So I said you need to wait 10 minutes, and I really think you do. I can't. So I'm gonna dish this up. Ooh. Nice and creamy. The first batch that I made, again, it was in a, I didn't say this, but it was in a cast iron pan. It was a little bit too big, and I felt like it maybe dried things out a little bit. But this, if you can see here, still has quite a bit of creaminess to it. So I'm very excited about that. It's so hot, so steamy. You know, I was happy with the idea. I was sort of inspired by those dishes that are like rigatoni noodles stacked upright. You know, sort of inspired by like a butternut squash ravioli. A lot of ideas went into this. Test batch was like good, you know, it was like proof of concept, but not quite there. Making it today, as hot as it is, I'm very happy. I love the textures. Love the little bit of like crunch that you get from the walnuts that I added. Just a nice little tang in there from the like tofu ricotta with a little bit of apple cider vinegar in there. And when you look at it, like the texture definitely, it has that lasagna-y vibe to it. I don't know, I'm really happy, really impressed. So again, the full recipe for this, monsonmadethis.com. You can just go there and see all the recipes, or there's a link below. Last year's butternut lasagna was really great. This, I would say, is, I don't know, I can't decide. It's been a year since I've had that, so I can't fairly say which one is better, but this is so good. You've got to try it. So if you do, leave a comment below. If you come up with a good, clever name for this dish, let me know, because even through cooking this, I haven't yet, so. I was worried that sauce was gonna get too stodgy, but it's really stayed nice, and ice cube just fell out of the ice maker. It really stayed nice and creamy, and even like, because I had an edge piece, had a nice little crispy edge. It keeps getting better with every bite, probably because it was so hot to begin with. Now I can actually taste it. Anyway, all right. I'll be back very soon with another recipe video, probably something seasonally appropriate as well. If you have any dishes that you make for the holidays that you would like to see a vegan version of, let me know, because I'm always open for ideas and suggestions. Thanks to all of my channel members. Sorry again that there hasn't been much content going over there, or no content at all. But thank you for the support, and thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for liking this video. And I'll see you very soon. So good. Now I got to figure out how to take pictures of this. I just dished up another piece, but I wanted you to see close up of this. Right? She's beautiful.